Peace and love, family. Welcome to another Read Book Club discussion. Tonight we are discussing Chapter 8 of The Color of Law by Ricard Rothstein. And the title of this chapter is Local Tactics. And so anyway, I read the chapter today and I'm super duper excited about discussing this chapter with you. I am your host, Dr. Ma'ad, and I have with me my big brother, my big bro, Brother T. Wolo. Brother T. Wolo, go ahead and introduce yourself to the listening audience, warrior.
Hey family, how you doing? Thank you so much for joining us in this discussion. It's going to be pretty good. We're going to learn a lot in this chapter of The Color of Law. Dr. Mott, we've been gone for a couple of weeks, but we're going to light them up with this right here. They're going to definitely enjoy seeing exactly how, once again, the government and private institutions wrote us out of neighboring being in certain neighborhoods, which i.e. kept us from wealth. So this is a hot chapter. We about to get into chapter 8.
Absolutely. And you're right, Brother T. We had a lot going on these past couple of weeks. You know, 1 week I was down at the All Black National Convention with Dr. Boyce Watkins. Shout out to Dr. Boyce Watkins and his team for a wonderful convention down in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I was there, you know, that weekend. And then the following weekend, I was at the reparations rally with Brother Tariq Nasheed.
Awesome.
And then after that, I was just burnt out. I said, I can't do it anymore. You know, like it's like, you know, is doing that on top of full-time, you know, family work. And so it was just a lot, you know, Brother
and running
T.
your own network.
You know, exactly. So Brother T, I said, I had to just take off. I can't do it, you know. And I remember speaking to Baba Mwalimu Barudi, and he described like a phenomenon called revolutionary burnout. And he was saying how a lot of us, you know, a lot of activists, you know, we go out here and we work on behalf of our people. But he was saying you got to take care of yourself, else you're going to experience burnout, where you're just mentally, emotionally, you know, spiritually exhausted. So he was like, you know, he was telling me, you know, be careful. I know that you want to do a lot, but your rest is important. And so last Sunday, I decided to take some rest. And so we appreciate your understanding. I see a lot of people are in the building. I want to salute some folks before we get started. Brother White, Brother Kawa G. I probably butchered it, but Brother Kawa G. White, he said, good evening, Queen, Dr. Oyama. Good evening, all. Peace and love to your family. All right, here we have Steve in the building from St. Lou. How you doing, Brother Steve? Peace and love to you, Brother Steve. He said, manners and respect. Ashe. Love to you. All right, I see love is in the building. Blockchain, you know, I love blockchain. Blockchain revolution is in the building. Blockchain said peace and power. Miss Old Lady, peace and greetings. Says Brother Quasi presented an excellent discussion. I couldn't make it. Oh, I was so upset. I couldn't make it. I heard that Baba Quasi went in yesterday.
Saturday,
shout out.
Right?
Yep, Saturday. So shout out to Brother Jabari Nator for bringing him to Baltimore. And shout out to the Temple of New African Thought. I heard that it was over there. And I heard that, you know, Baba came through and dropped a lot of jewels. And so I couldn't make it. I was at a family function last night and couldn't make it. That family function started at 6 and the lecture was at 7. And I was like, good God Almighty. So couldn't make it. But I was definitely there in spirit. Shout out to Virgo Venom. That queen is in the building. She said, greetings, Dr. Mad and Brother T. Glad to be back. Ashe. A beautiful mind is in the building. She says, peace and love, everyone. Peace and love to you. We got Omar Reed in the building. He said, Black African power. Peace, Dr. Mad the Great. Ashe. Peace and love to you. Danielle Scott is in the building. Danielle said, Hotep family. I see Brother Chris Lyles. B1 all the way. B1 is in the building. And you know what I love about B1, Brother T? It's race first. It's what we talk about all the time. Having a B1 mentality, having a race first mentality. That's what B1 is. Thinking about us first, putting our needs, our interests, our wants, our goals first. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I'm about to say nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. Shout out to Aquarius 79. She says, evening family. It was off the chain. She was battling Brother T on Thursday. I brought Dr. Karinga, Dr. Malana Karinga, Malana. I'm sorry, I always butcher it. I always say Malana. He says, no, it's Maulana. And so Maulana Karinga, yeah, that Baltimore accent just want to say Malana Karinga. He's like, no. It's Maulana Karinga, Dr. Malana Karinga. So I brought that elder on this past Thursday. and there were a lot of trolls in the building, Brother T.
Mm.
Folks who were listening to the rumor mill and
Mm-hmm.
holding on to some things that were actually cleared up
Okay.
decades ago. And maybe those people are unaware that some of those accusations were cleared up, decades ago. But a lot of trolls were in the building, and now I'm an FBI agent and all this other
Now
crap.
you got it straight from the horse's mouth. You got it straight from the.
You get what I'm saying?
Right.
You get what I'm saying? The topic was COINTELPRO, and
Right.
I'm like, Dr. Karenga lived it. Like he lived through that era. So in my mind, I said, well, what better person to talk about COINTELPRO than Dr. Karenga, somebody who actually experienced it and lived, through that period, and we're actually living through it today, right? Because I think this is like COINTELPRO on steroids with the invention of the internet. But Aquarius 79, she was doing her thing, trying to get the trolls out of the building. So salute to you, warrior, that warrior queen. Shimsu, brother Shimsu is in the building. Peace and love to you. Peace and love, brother Shimsu. Brother Shimsu, you got to read this book and join the panel, brother. He said, did they make a video copy? I heard that Baba Ashwar Kwesi said no. He doesn't want anybody to make any copies of his presentations. He always directs people to his website, kemetnew.com, for any lectures. So no, it wasn't recorded. Peace and love to the young warrior, Nasir Randall. That's one of my students from Morgan State. And shout out to Morgan State University, Brother T. They came down to the church, 5 brothers from Morgan State. There's an organization in Morgan called Smooth. And it's a brotherhood. And those brothers, they reached out to me. Well, actually, one of them is taking me for a class. And he said, Doc, I want to do some outreach work. And so they came down to my mother's church yesterday, went around, fed the homeless, broke down the tables, helped set up for Sunday's service today. And so shout out to Morgan State, man. It's in the building. Let me see who else we got. Who else we got? Gregory Torrance said, Hotep to the fam. See, Ro is in the building. Eso Anola. Abola says, peace and love, our powerful queen. Oh, it's my brother from the Togo. Peace and love to you, warrior. Peace and love to you, warrior. All right, so Brother T, we see the title of it, family. I called this title Sabotage and Justice Delayed. I thought that title, Brother T, after reading and studying this chapter, was very fitting. Sabotage and justice delay. Because all I read, Brother T, in the pages was how we were just sabotaged. Like any type of Black progress was just sabotage. And these were different techniques that white folks were employing to sabotage Black progress. And then we would take things to court and we would win later on. But by the time we won, we couldn't even make the moves that we were fighting for. So remember, Dr. King said, justice delayed is justice denied. You get what I'm saying? And so, that's what Dr. King said. And so
say that again.
He said, justice delayed is justice denied. You know what I mean? And so in my mind, Brother T, I was like, dang, so we were taking people to court, but we by the time we won the court case, we could not even act on what we were fighting to act on. Another thing, Brother T, before you started off, that I noticed in this chapter is that white folks organize and they strategize. I want to say that again. White folks organize and they strategize, because anytime that we were making moves, white folks would come together. Hold up, let's say that over. They unify, organize, and strategize and mobilize. Those are the 4 things. Hold up, Brother T. We gotta say that one more time.
You gotta say it again.
I said it one more time, Brother T. I know in this chapter, the white folks, they unify, they organize, they strategize, and then they mobilize.
There you go.
That's what those white folks did. So anytime that we wanted to make moves and they didn't want us to come into their neighborhoods, they said, oh man, they would unify in a heartbeat, create an organization in a heartbeat. They would incorporate their land in a heartbeat. They would come up with zoning ordinances and all sorts of techniques to make sure, and they would be victorious a lot of those times. And so we need to, I remember in the Art of War, Sun Tzu talked about, knowing your enemy, knowing your enemy, knowing yourself, yes, but knowing your enemy. And there are things that when you know your enemy that you can actually learn from your enemy.
That's right.
By watching your enemy. And so anyway, Brother T, I want you to go ahead, Brother T, and start us off.
Oh, goodness. We can just end it right there with your 4 points. They're all powerful. Let me tell you something, Dr. Mott. One thing I got from this chapter, which was utterly amazing, and you made a point in your opening, was that once they strategized, they set it up in a way that we could not mobilize. See, that strategy was self-fulfilling for them. But once it was brought to the light and the wrong was shown to them, right? You know, we had in this chapter so many little organizations. We had the Amish community coming to our aid, but yet they could not stop the onslaught of the strategy. They gave us places to live, but once places were built, created, all the resources were sucked from them, right?
Facts.
And by the time we got our census together, and because we went to the Detroit ghettos after they tore down certain parts of the communities which we congregated, by the time justice came, and you made this point again, Dr. Ma'at, we dwindled. It was one part of this book, of this chapter, that stated it was 100,000 people displaced per year based off highway building, right? By the time justice prevailed, it was down to 8,000. It was, like you said, unification, right? Come on, Mr. Dr. Maya, help me out here. Unification.
I said they unified.
That's right.
They organized, they strategized, and they mobilized.
And now by that time, they built this plan of saying urban revitalization. We heard that before, people, right?
Absolutely.
We heard about them, bringing the urban area up by these plans. Pay attention. Because when they say that they're coming to build the community up, you better make sure you have enough foresight to understand what the end is going to look like.
That's right.
They built highways, created highways, but these plans was to displace us into other communities that they could, guess what? Once they displaced us in these communities, they pulled the resources.
That's a fact.
Sometimes early on in the plan of building these highways, they didn't have a plan for us. So we have to pay close attention to what we're dealing with. Now, it brings me, when I said the word dealing, I think on playing cards. You ever heard that saying? You have to handle it, deal with the cards that you dealt.
That's right.
But in their hand, they had the ace, the joker. They had all these other cards that can pile on and help them to win.
Absolutely.
The cards that we were dealt were a bunch of duds. We had no ability to move on, no resources, no homes. So when they had the strategy to put this road, it helped whites mobilize into the towns and to the cities where their jobs were. But they had no plan in the creation of these highways for us. So we have to be real careful. And I had a conversation earlier with a loved one, and they said, what's the use of the history? It's all about talking good about history, about the past. If you don't understand what went on, you will never know what's going on.
Come on. Say that one more time, Brother T.
If you don't know what went on, you will never understand what's going on.
Come on.
So you have to understand that when these plans and these politicians ask for your vote in this midterm and what in the future, you better know their plans, because they could be wiping you out.
That's right.
And that's the start of this chapter.
That's right.
Finish this thing up.
No, that's right, Brother T. And I just wanted to add to that. That's why I don't have conversations with people who aren't studying. Or when I say conversations with people about what's going on today and the problems that plague our community and solutions. You get what I'm saying? I don't talk to them about problems and solutions, because if you don't understand what shaped or caused these problems, then you can't intellectually pose a solution. If you understand what I'm saying? Like if you cannot articulate, if you're not knowledgeable, right, and can articulate the things, the forces, the policies and practices that shaped our current condition, then how the hell are you going to sit here and talk to me about a solution? I don't talk to folks like that. You get what I'm saying, Brother T? I had to get out. It was a couple of conversations. People invited me, Dr. Ma, can you come on Clubhouse and have these discussions? And I did it one time, Brother T, and that was my last time.
Right.
I got on there with a bunch of folks, and they were proposing solutions that our brothers and sisters were talking about in the 1800s. And that's when I said, brothers, I got to get off. I got to get out of here. Because what book did you get that from? Well, did you read The Color of Law?
Right.
Did you read The Hidden Cost of Being an African American by Thomas Shapiro? Have you read The Color of Law? No, I ain't read none of that stuff. Okay, right. All right, okay. I got to get out of here. You understand? Because we're not going to be able to have a fruitful conversation,
Where
fruitful
does the conversation
dialogue.
start, Dr. Mahad? When we, and this is for our family as well, our chat. Where does the conversation start if they haven't even read what's in the beginning? You can't understand the whole conversation, whole discussion. Where's it going to start? The solution is all we down here. Is you have to have a common ground. That's why I'm glad you mentioned the books, because you can now have the reference, the dates, the times, the people. Everything is there for you to have a fruitful conversation.
Absolutely. And like I said, that's why I got off the line quick with those. I said, brothers, I said, y'all need to read. And once you read, invite me back, I'll come back on, I'll come back on. I said, but, you can't have an intelligent conversation about the problems that plague the Black community and offer up any type of solutions if you're not aware of what created this stuff, if you're not aware of the source of our issues. But go ahead, Brother T. I love this picture. So go ahead, talk about this picture in the first page under
first picture. Now, I'm gonna tell you out this chapter, he don't put a lot of pictures, right? Don't put a lot of pictures. The one that got me is the Detroit picture, but we gonna focus on this one. Let me go back to that page. Apologize, okay. We have the mayor of Miami, the picture Dr. Ma just showed you. It sends the first wrecking ball into the homes of African Americans near downtown, fulfilling the city's plan to relocate them to a distant ghetto. Now, this whole chapter, the local tactics, basically is about how the plans of the city, of the state, to urbanize basically the neighborhoods by adding structures. So we talk about the first page. So I underline this one. Okay. The San Lorenzo Village was the nation's largest wartime government insured project. Now, we talked about wartime projects in previous chapters. The government funded citizens who allowed soldiers to live with them. Okay. So we talk about the wartime. This is another funded agency. Okay. So we have St. Lorenzo Village, which is the nation's largest wartime government insured project, intended for workers at the naval shipyards and support factories, right? Like the homes in Rollingwood, each house included a bedroom with a separate entrance so the owner could rent to another war worker, which was a benefit. This was a big benefit. Why? Number one, you was helping the country. So in order to help, we're going to give you some funding. Now, as we learned in previous chapters, we learned that Blacks were not allowed to have this luxury. They had shanty homes and stuff built, thus didn't even meet the obligations of building, because in which you get violated, which you get violations, you get fined. This is another tactic that the wartime participants could live closer to their work, a naval shipyard, right? So in this chapter, first pages talk about one of the biggest banks in America, which we call the Bank of America. The development was financed by a $7 million FHA authorized loan from who else? Bank of America, formerly known as the Bank of Italy. Okay. And from the American Trust Company. It was even insured. Okay. Once again, a federally funded building helping whites move wartime workers in, funded by Bank of America and insured. You remember a lot of things we couldn't do because we couldn't get the banking and insurance, okay, because our homes were not insured. So I'm just bringing these points up. The development was financed by this, okay? So, okay, the American company, as was the case with other FHA developments, houses were sold relatively low prices, so they can be within the reach of wartime workers. And the deeds included restrictive covenants. Once again, we talk about restrictive covenants. These homes were paramount for the workers. The people who they lived with also benefited because they got money from the war workers. So everybody getting money. They're getting funded by the FHA and the Bank of America. They also getting their house insured. They're also good for the wartime workers because they're living close to where they work. Isn't that beautiful?
Beautiful, very convenient.
Look, it's beautiful that we can live 5 minutes from our job. That means we never be late. We
That's
get
right.
home enough time to get some rest. Is all the benefit. Everybody getting paid here, right? And they're getting good rest. So now it states that, as was the case with the other FHA developments, houses were sold at a relatively low prices so as to be within reach of wartime workers, and the deeds included restrictive covenants to prevent future resales to African American. I had to make that point in its first page because these buildings could be created for everybody. But once again, because of the covenants, supposed to be lawful because they were allowed, you're not supposed to give FHAs and insurance to things that supposed to go against the 14th Amendment. And like the 14th Amendment started in 1950 or 1943, the 14th Amendment started way before then. So it just shows you once again, government was complicit with keeping us away because they could have easily said, hey, you know what? Because of those covenants, we're not going to give you any funding. And because of these covenants, you're not getting any insurance. Thus, the $7 million you put into for this project shouldn't happen. But it did happen. And the covenant kept African Americans with the keeping them about the ability to buy into it. All right, Dr. Maya?
No, fast. Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Trigger Man in the building. Trigger Man had gave us a reference right here. He said, The Half Never Told is a pivotal book about slavery and American capitalism. So peace to him. Rose said, if you don't educate yourself and all you do is what the dominant society told you, then you'll be a white supremacist too. Facts.
Yes.
All right. Brother Gregory said, nothing is new under the sun if we don't know our story, history. Thank you, Brother Gregory. If we don't know our story, right? Not his story, but our story, then history will be repeated. All right. And peace to my pirate brain, Mr. Pirate Brain. I see you in the building. CJ Young, peace to you, beloved. And then also Trigger Man said, I'm Black Man of Spear, but I'm glad someone is doing this work. Brother, I don't care what spear you're in, brother. I love you because you're black. You're a black man,
black
brother.
First.
Yeah, you black first. I'm black first, brother. I don't care what spear you in, brother. You know what I mean? I love you because you're a black man. And that's where I'm at with it, Brother Trigger Man. All right. And happy that you're here with us tonight, brother. And so anyway, thank you so much for that introduction, Brother T. But the picture that I showed you earlier was a picture of, I believe it's the mayor. Oh, I think, did you mention that, Brother T? That it's the mayor that was actually throwing a wrecking ball into the homes of African Americans. It said near downtown, right? Near downtown, fulfilling the city's plan to relocate them to a distant ghetto. And so, as Brother T stated, the highway system was one way that not only did they keep, black people out of the downtown areas and keep, black people out of the downtown areas or separate from the downtown areas, but the highway system was also a tactic that they used to destroy black communities. I want to make sure that we don't miss that. So it was a way to allow white people access to the downtown areas, as Brother T said, where they worked, right? But it was also a tactic to literally destroy African American communities. And I want to show you how they did that in Baltimore, but we'll get into that. And so thank you so much, Brother T, for that introduction. So we talked about the FHA. So let's move to the next line. All right. And so then they talk about another project called the Sunny Hills project in Milpitas. And so remember that story, family, that Richard Rothstein told in the beginning about a group of Black workers who were working at a Ford's plant. I believe it was a Ford's plant, and the plant was locating from, I think, like Oakland, California, or what? No, Richmond. It was, they were locating from, that plant was relocating from Richmond, California, to Milpitas. I might be pronouncing it right. Milpitas or Milpitas or whatever. But they were located. The plant was relocating, and so they made sure that all of the white folks were able to get housing down there near the plant. Right. Again, as Brother T said, to make it, convenient for white workers. And so because they did not create housing for Black people or Black workers, a lot of Black workers had to commute. They had to carpool, which was, I think they said 100 miles to and from work, right, to get to work, because there was literally no housing for them. And so anyway, it talked about how in 1955 there was a guy named Bohannon who was a developer. He started developing the Sunny Hills project in Milpitas, and of course this was for white folks. And so it says that the VA approved the loan. They guaranteed the loan. It said, and required little to no down payment for veterans and low monthly payments. All right. And so it says when it became apparent that no existing Milpitas area development would sell or rent to Black workers, there was an organization called the American Friends Service Committee. Okay. It was a Quaker group that was committed to racial integration. They offered to assist a guy named Ben Gross, who was the chair of the Four Plants Union Housing Committee, to find a developer who would agree to build a racial subdivision down in Milpitas, so that Black workers could get there. So it says that, what they were trying to do, it says the AFCF, and that's the organization. It says they had an existing campaign to press Richmond to desegregate its public housing and define adequate integrated residences for its African American population being displaced by the demolition of the federal war projects. But anyway, as time went on, okay, so they had this project. It's called the Sunny Hills Project. You had white folks moving down there who was working at the Ford plant. What plant did I call it earlier, Brother T? Was it the Ford plant? Okay, I did call it the Ford plant. But the Ford workers, the white workers, were able to move down there and into that all white project, but the Black workers couldn't. And so you had this organization going around trying to get builders to go down there to build, an integrated project so that Black workers could get down there. So it says right here at the top of page 117 that this organization recruited their first builder. And what happened with their first builder was that they could not find a financial institution in San Francisco Bay or San Jose area that was willing to provide funds for the development. So they ran into trouble there. Okay. And then the Quakers who were running this organization had some connects, Brother T, in New York. So they go up to New York. All right. And they holler at the vice president of the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, who, even though he was apprehensive about giving them the money, he went ahead and gave the developer or the builder the funds. And so after the builder came back and said, well, look, I got the land, I have the funds to develop, let me develop. Then they said the Santa Clara Board of Supervisors, they rezoned the site from residential to industrial use. And so remember, Brother T, in previous chapters, rezoning was a technique that white people use to keep us out. So their areas or their communities were zoned or called residential zoning or listed as residential. What they did they would put they would zone our communities as industrial. So that's why, if you notice, a lot of the Black communities, a lot of our neighborhoods or our communities are in plants. It's plants, it's bars, it's clubs, because literally the zoning is industrial. Okay. And so that was a way that they kept Black folks where they were and white folks where they are. So anyway, they've rezoned the area or the site from residential to industrial use. That's one thing that they did. They also made sure that he would never be granted the necessary approvals, okay, to start his development. And then it says the town adopted a new zoning law, increasing the minimum lot size from 6,000 to 8,000 square feet, making the project unfeasible for working class buyers. So they tried to, what they did was it increased the square footage. So now, Brother T, guess what? It costs more money to create the project. Well, if it costs more money to create the project, then they got to pass that cost down to the people who are buying the housing, buying the units. And so, and the fourth thing they did, it says the seller of the land then canceled the option upon learning that the project will be integrated. At that point, the builder just gave up. So then it was another builder that this organization recruited who proposed to the union to create two separate projects. One be integrated and the other one is white, right? And it says because white buyers would be directed to the all-white project, it was apparent that the plan for a nominally integrated project would result in an all-black one. So it says the builder proposed to construct the white project in the suburban area and the integrated one in a less desirable environment. Let's pause right there, Brother T. Isn't that what they always do to us?
Yes.
They said, we'll put the white folks here, in a desirable plot of land or in a desirable environment, but then they will build our communities in undesirable environments. So anyway, it said that this particular plot for black people, where they proposed the black project, this particular plot, it says it was sandwiched between the Ford plant and 2 tracks zoned for heavy industry. So then, when we talk about have conversations about reparations, Brother T, not only am I thinking about slavery and Jim Crow, I'm thinking about all of these policies and practices that not only enabled us from accumulating wealth, but policies and practices that led to the decline of our health. Because how did these things impact our people health-wise? By living next to power lines, by living next to dumps and waste centers. You get what I'm saying? By living in industries, by living in areas that's, where you have a bunch of businesses and pollutants in the air. That impacted us health-wise too. So it's not just about money, it's about our health was impacted.
That's true.
At the end of the day. And so anyway, Brother T, did you want to continue? Did you want to chime in?
And that's why I love the fact that we share this moment and chopping the book up and information, because you find the points and you just be putting them in line. I highlighted that, I highlighted that, but I add one more thing I'm gonna add in. I find one more thing. It's like she got everything I just underlined. We find that the Quaker had to attempt how many times? Four times.
Yeah.
Denied. We brought up the first part of the chapter. We stated that when I read, it was the mayor was cahoots. Matter of fact, he was up on there with the wrecking ball.
Right.
They got the loan, FHA loan. Bank of America was in line, and also the insurance. Now, one time that project, part of that strategy, as you mentioned, the unified decision, not one part was ever denied. The plan was to get rid of Negro Town.
Come on, that's what it says at the bottom. Come on.
Right? The plan was to remove Negro Town. That was the end goal. It was none of this that the Quaker community was the American Friends Service community. They went through, every time it was for us, obstacles. Revision, and let's give them something. Okay. In this reading of that part, I asked, were there any black developers?
I didn't come across any in this book.
I asked the question during this time frame, during this year, were there any black banks? I asked the same question. Was there any black insurance companies? So when people ask solutions, Let's talk about banking. Let's talk about developers. Let's talk about being insured.
That's right.
And making sure we have land in proper places without the health problems that you mentioned prior. Let's think about planning and talking and discussing that based off this former information.
That's right.
All right, Dr. Ma, you go ahead.
No, I just know that's 100%. I'm with you, brother T. I mean, that was 100% accurate. Like, you say you're talking about solutions,
right?
All right, like you said, where were the black banks? And then if you read The Color of Money, you'll see what happened to black banks.
That's right.
And what was going on with black banks. So anyway, so the builder said, look, I'll give you these two projects, one in the suburbs, and one in an undesirable, environment. And so the organization said, nah, to that developer or builder, no, we can't do it. So it says, although in the membership was overwhelmingly white, the union adopted a policy that it would not support only developers who would commit to integrated housing. So they end up shooting that down. So then there was a San Jose businessman who obtained a plot of land that was adjacent to the all-white Sunnyvale project. And so it said that, he wanted to build, housing there for black folks. So it said every bank or thrift institution that he approached, knowing that FHA backing would be unavailable, it says refused to, of course, lend him money. Okay. And then it says, or they agreed to lend him money, but they wanted him to pay a higher interest, of course, right? And so it says right here that the union was able to persuade this builder to continue only by promising the builder that they will be responsible for finding the lender. So of course, these Quakers used their connections. They went back to the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company and they talked to that person and they were able to get funding for the project. So then it says in January of 1955, more than a year after Ford notified its Richmond workers that their jobs were going to Milpitas, and only a month and a half before the scheduled transfer of automobile assembly, this organization or this union was able to advise its black members in Richmond that a non-discriminatory housing development called Aguila Caliente was going to be available in the Milpitas area. It says by this time, many white workers had already found housing in racially restricted Santa Clara County neighborhoods. And so this company, okay, it was the David Bohannon's, his company was the company responsible for building the Sunnyvale's white project. And so Brother T, they started battling. He's battling with the union. He's battling because they're like, we can't move these black folks on a tract of land that's adjacent to this all white community. We can't do that. So they started battling. And so this union was doing so many things to sabotage, building this project. One thing that they did, Brother T, which was interesting to me, they started messing with the people's sewage. Remember, messing with their sewage, messing with the plumbing, the sewage. And so it says right here, the union and the builder estimated pros. Okay, so it said under pressure from David Bohannon's company, the Sanitary District Board held an emergency meeting and adopted an ordinance that increased the sewage connection fee by more than 10 times the $100 figure. So it says the new charge called the builder to suspend the work. So they made it like, think about this, Brother T. So they're trying to build this development next to all white development. And those developers were like, no, we're not having it. And so they went as far as going to mess up their sewage connection and get that rate increased so that these people could not finish it. So the builder suspended it. So it says problems continue to persist. Okay. It says the builder indicated that he would proceed. He still said, I'm going to proceed with the project. So first he suspended the work. And then he said, you know what, despite the higher sewer connection fees, we're going to go ahead and we're going to continue. So they started battling. And it got to a point, and I'm at the bottom, Brother T, of page 120. It says the Aguila Caliente builder could no longer sustain the delays, okay, and no longer could afford the legal bills and would be incurred if he persisted. So the Bohannon's company, it says, perhaps influenced by the attorney's general implicit threat, also tired of the fight. It says the union's boycott had been reasonable. So again, family, they were battling. So you had these two developers battling. So it says finally in November of 1955, both of the builders sold out to a new developer. They was just like, forget it. So they were battling so much, both of them got tired. So you had the developer from the all-white project, and then the person who was trying to develop an integrated project next to that all-white project. They battled so long that they just said, forget it. And both of them sold their projects to another developer who said, well, we're just going to create what's called a combined development, okay, that took on the name Sunnyvale, California. And it says that banks and thrift institutions continue to refuse to do this without exorbitant interest rates, subcharge to issue individual mortgages without FHA insurance. It says to borrowers living in integrated projects. All right. So it says they end up going through with it, right? So they end up getting the FHA and all of that. They end up going through with it. And so at the bottom of the first paragraph, Brother T, it says the union and its members buyers agreed on the basis of 20 of the project's first 500 units, were sold to African American families. But let's say this, by the time, here's the justice delayed, justice denied part. By the time, however, the Milpitas Ford plant had been operational for nearly a year, almost all white workers who wanted to move to that area had done so. The delays, legal fees, and financing problems had raised the cost of the combined Sunny Hills project to a level that was unaffordable to all but the most highly skilled and highly paid Ford workers. Many of the African American workers have become so discouraged about housing opportunities in the Milpitas area that, like Frank Stevenson, it says they had formed carpools to share the 100 daily round trip from Richmond to Milpitas. So that's what I mean, Brother T, by justice. Dr. King said justice delayed is justice denied. So by the time they had a combined project, they waited and they could move in. It was so because of the interest rates and the sewer connection fees and the amount of time that even took to get approved. By that time, the black folks, them brothers were tired, Brother T. They were like, forget it. We'll just carpool, man. And so can you imagine getting up every morning, Brother T, and commuting 100 miles to your job? And that's just one way. So you're spending at least, about an hour and 40 minutes. I'm just assuming that we're going at 60 miles per hour, right? So I'm assuming, so about an hour and 40-minute commute to your job and back. I know those brothers were worn out. And then you in the factory, you in the plant working, for hours. And then you got to get back in a car and drive. Those brothers were worn out. But again, Brother T, that speaks to the sabotage. So some of them brothers probably end up quitting their jobs. You get what I'm saying? Like, man, yes. Forget it. I'm not doing that, man. And probably end up quitting their jobs. Go ahead, Brother T.
This is the hidden cost of being black.
That's right.
Think about it. Just what you just described, and being tired, being overcharged, access being denied. Let's paint a picture. Let's paint a 1-minute picture. If any, come on. Just bear with me. We are workers at this Ford plant, and we go to work 100 miles every day. 200 miles. Let's say 200 miles from to and fro, right? Our families home, our comfort, our rest. They don't get to see us during the week. Why? Because we get back late. We leave early. We get back late. 5 days out the week. We have to do this because we got to make money. What type of family life is that? What can we actually build? Because we always have the threat of being fired. Because I'm sure they were strict on time. People don't think this is not written in these lines. It's just a situation. What happened? But all of that stress, all of those things that can keep us from being a happy, well-do family. Now, I always think about what time was this? What date was this? Think about all the other restrictions. Now, getting a good paying job in a plant, because it wasn't education. Now people didn't get a lot of education to get these jobs. It wasn't skilled. What type of family life was created from this? I know it's not in the lines, not in the paragraphs, not in the sentences, not, in this book. I just want to just break that down so we can kind of take that in to realize how hard and difficult it was. I don't want anyone to just brush past these points.
That's right.
To realize how difficult to do this day by day. That's something to think about, to muster when we realize, okay, how does it look today? And I'm just asking the question based off this daily. 100 miles. I work downtown, 15-minute drive. I can't imagine going from here past DC, because it's 50 miles, 60 miles to DC from Baltimore. So we going further just to get to work and to come back home. 200 miles. The wear and tear on the vehicle.
Yeah, that's what Shamsi just said. He said the car was wore out too.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? So it's like they put these brothers in a lose-lose situation, man. Like a lose-lose situation. Again, that's why I labeled this chapter Sabotage and Justice Delayed.
Makes so much
Sabotage and Justice Delayed. So at the bottom of 121, he goes on to say, hey, in the ensuing years, African-American residents in Milpitas continue to be confined to Sunny Hills, because remember now is this combined project, right, where Black folks are living. It says in relatively undesirable project built in the 1960s between two freeways and heavily trafficked main shopping thoroughfare. Let me ask you this, Brother T. Have you noticed that in a lot of Black communities, we live right near the freeway? Yes. Off of 83, Martin Luther King off of 83.
And he named it that. I'll lead it so we can feel, feel connected, right?
Yes. 95 right down the street, 395 runs through the communities. And so it says that they literally were building these highways, as you stated, to separate us, to keep us isolated in our areas. Okay. So it says as the Milpitas area developed, the plants transferred there from the Oakland-Richmond corridor. One was called Trail Mobile Factory that relocated from Berkeley in 1955. It says soon after, the plant manager announced a change in the hiring policy. The company, look at this, Brother T, the company would accept only new workers who lived in the vicinity. Come on, Brother T, go ahead, build on that.
No, that's the point I was trying to make, and I got lost in the sauce, but I'm glad you found it. You dipped the nugget right in there. That's the point. I said, being 100 miles away from work, you had to go to work 100 miles, go home 100 miles. Then the job says, you know what? I want to change the policy. I want only workers who live in the homes that were created for them, low price homes. Now, I only want those workers. I'm not saying Blacks can't be here, but I prefer you live in your vicinity of work. Why? Because now the plan is already laid out. The highways are built, and this was the end goal. This was the 10-year plan that the city wrote out. Now, who got to do their part? The jobs. Now ensure that the people who lived in the places that we built only have these positions. Thank you. You see how the plans laid out? It may not happen in 1 year. It may not happen in 2, but they will paint a whole bunch of play and a whole bunch of eye candy for us, saying, oh, we're included. We're included. This for the end game for us to be wiped out. I just tell you, and that right there is the nail in the coffin. Just think about that. Now, your employment says you can no longer work here
if you don't live in the area.
Based off a new policy, a hiring policy. No new people. So after all the people who wear themselves out, their cars out from doing the 200 miles a day, all we will have, when the smoke clears, we will have the people we intended for it to be.
Mm. And so, Brother T, look, I'm in the middle of page 122 where he actually lays out the common tactics that they use to segregate us or to isolate us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he says this. He said it wasn't only the large-scale federal programs of public housing and mortgage finance that created de jure segregation. Hundreds, if not thousands, of smaller acts of government. Let me say that
Mm-hmm.
again. Hundreds, if not thousands, of smaller acts of government contributed. It says this included petty actions like denial of access to public utilities. Remember, they talked about that sewer connection earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It says determining once African Americans wanted to build that their property was, after all, needed for parkland. So, up, eminent domain. No, we need this for a park. We need this for a
Mm-hmm.
highway. We need this for a
Mm-hmm.
hospital. And so
Right.
now they're confiscating your land. So hold on. It says, after all, the for parkland, or discovering that a road leading to African American homes was now private. So now you don't got a road that you can drive to get to your home. So now we're saying this road is private. It belongs to these people over here. It says they included routing interstate highways to create racial boundaries or to shift the residential placement of African American families. And they included choosing school sites to force families to move to segregated neighborhoods if they wanted education for their children. It says, taken in isolation, we can easily dismiss such devices as aberrations. But when we consider them as a whole, we can see that they were part of a national system. Do you hear the language that he's using, Brother T? It was a national system. We can't leave that out, by which state and local government supplemented federal efforts to maintain the status of African Americans as a lower caste, with housing segregation preserving the badges of incidents of slavery. I mean, really, when you think about it, he actually summarized this chapter right in that paragraph, because he goes on to give us examples, Brother T, of these things. So at the top of page 123, he mentions a couple, and I'm not going to read everything, family. I'm just going to kind of peruse and kind of go through. At the beginning of, at the top of page 123, he mentions a University Pennsylvania professor and his wife, right? In 1954, they purchased a site in Swarthmore. It was a town outside of Philadelphia, and they planned to develop a tract of 28 middle-class homes to be sold to African Americans. When they found out about this family, okay, when the association and the people in the areas found out that he was actually going to sell homes, build homes for African American people and sell it to them, there was a council that reacted and said, hold up, you cannot develop this. We need a housing plan from you with a certified engineering drawing, okay, which was an expensive condition that it had not opposed on other developments, okay. And so then again, they began to deploy or employ other tactics to stop this couple from building homes for African American people. So at the end, it says, with no prospect that such impediments would ever end, the professor and his wife just abandoned the project. A similar situation happened. It says in a development in Deerfield, Illinois, in a white suburb of Chicago in 1959. A developer purchased 2 tracts of vacant land and proposed to subdivide and build 51 houses on them with a plan to sell to African Americans. But of course, he was sabotaged. What happened? At the top of page 2124, Brother T, I have in here that they organized. It says right here, a citizens committee was organized, and 600 protesters marched on the town board meeting being held in a school gymnasium. And it says, by a show of hands, the crowd vowed its uncompromising rejection of integration. So these white folks, what did they do again, Brother T? They unified, they organized, they strategized, and they mobilized. Let's keep on going. So then it says at the bottom of page 124, and Brother T, you can jump in at any time. It says another tactic. It says, at that time, condemning a proposed African American residence for park purposes was a useful device for whites only communities. Okay. So they said, as a Missouri appeals court ruled also in 1959, the judicial system could not inquire as to the motives for condemnation, provided the purpose of the condemnation was public, which a park surely was. So another tactic that they use, where they would say, okay, in this African American community, we want to build a park here. Eminent domain, Brother T. So we're going to come into your neighborhood. We're going to kick everybody out. And we're going to say we're building a park for the public there. And it says the appeals court said it's not a damn thing we can do about it if the mission is for public purposes. See, these white folks, I'm telling you, Brother T, we got to see how they evolve. I don't think black folks think that white folks evolve in the way that they do things. So did you notice, Brother T, in the beginning, it was the FHA loans and the VA loans, which were used to create exclusively white projects, right? White projects in suburbs to keep black folks out. That was the first thing. Then after that, that just wasn't enough. They had to create racial covenants. After racial covenants, they said, wait a minute, zoning. Okay, we can use zoning. Wait a minute, let's do zoning ordinances, right? And so they keep on strategizing. And see, that's what black folks got to do. We got to make sure that we evolve in our strategies. We want to use the same strategies that Dr. King and them was doing in the 60s. And I'm not saying, Brother T, that some stuff won't work, but we got to evolve our strategies. And if you read this work, you'll see that they continue to update their game, Brother T. They didn't play the same game. It went from, look at this. It went from FHA and VA loans to racial covenants to zoning to zoning ordinances. Now they're saying, hold up, we'll just declare this as public. We'll just declare this as, they started getting sophisticated, right? Well, we'll just say that we're going to use this for public purposes, right? We'll put a park here. Or what we'll do is we'll close down all of the African American schools in this neighborhood, and we'll build the African American schools across town, which is going to force African American people to go across town because that's where their children could go to school. Or what we'll do is create a highway system and just run a highway through there. So they start becoming sophisticated. And so we got to become sophisticated in the way that we think and in the way that we strategize. Brother T, you want to jump in?
No, because how can you come after you? I mean, Dr. Mike, you laid it out because it's like you said, evolving their strategy. Because the end goal is to make sure that they're taken care of. So they'll go by any means necessary for that thing to happen.
Absolutely. They
did, Dr. Ma'at. You broke it down. I'm hoping everyone in the chat picked up what you just put down there. I mean, I can't add anything to it because the plan to displace African Americans and building a highway is what I was about to mention. You already stated that. Proof that blacks were detriment. You took away that point. I just want to go to this picture. Let's go to the picture to show how our babies.
Yes, Brother T.
Our babies.
That broke my heart, Brother T, when I saw that picture.
This picture, because he don't put a lot of pictures in the book, but these babies watch these homes be broken down for highway construction. What they say, the destruction of Nigger Town. These babies had no idea what was to come. Over 100,000 residents dwindled all the way down to 8,000 before they got into justice. By the time these babies were grown, they was always part of the plan. Our babies. This is how malicious the plans were. It was terrible. But like Dr. Ma'at said, they evolve their strategy. They keep it moving. So we're forced to deal with the cards that we have in our hand. But we don't have a winning hand based off of the strategy. So we have to intercept the strategy and make sure that all moving parts, when we mobilize, is put together. Don't just give us land. Because you may give us land and an industrial part that may give us cancer in 10 to 15
Come on,
years.
come on, brother T.
Just don't give us the land, good land, but restrict us with building a sewer system that will be won't be too high for us to maintain or to create, or not adequate. So it's all these little things. Oh, you know what? It's going to cost. We're going to add this penalty, that penalty. So when we get our own land and we do these things and building our community, this right here showed you how they can keep us from doing so, even if we had the opportunity to do it. These are restrictive covenants within the policies in order to create. It's always something. When even that is, so we have to realize, okay, when it's time to build, let's remember what happened in 1943. Let's make sure that everything's up and up. Make sure we have our developers, our insurance, we got the banks, we have the land, we have the people, the lawyers in place, the leaders in place to make sure that we can make sure we have good policies, make sure there's not anything to keep us from getting this thing done. Because we had to learn from 70 years ago when it was very difficult for us to do so. So many moving parts.
No, absolutely. And I'm glad that you said that. And you just, I love how we just be in sync. You said so many moving parts. And that's a great segue into the next point on page 125 in the middle, where he says condemnations of property and manipulations of zoning designations to prevent African Americans from building occurred almost routinely in the 1950s and 1960s. So they would rezone that property. And I think we mentioned that earlier, Brother T, how they would rezone the property from residence to industrial. So it says there was one case that actually caught national attention. This was in 1969. I wasn't born yet. It says a Methodist church sponsored a nonprofit organization proposed to construct a federally subsidized, racially integrated complex for moderate and low. We say, Brother T?
What page is that?
This is the middle of page 125. So it says for moderate and low income families in Black Jack, an all white suburb in unincorporated St. Louis County. It says in response, voters in Black Jack, it says incorporated their community and adopted a zoning ordinance that prohibited future development of more than 3 homes per acre. So they'll rezone the area. It said this made development of new moderate income housing impossible, although such modest units already existed within the new city's boundaries. All right. And it says several African Americans in St. Louis City sued. They claimed that they had been unable to find decent homes outside the ghetto and therefore had little access to jobs that were increasingly suburban. So it says the incident attracted national attention and the Nixon administration got involved. All right. So it says the federal appeals court had ordered Black Jack to permit a pro-integration group to proceed. And then it goes into what the court observed. But this is where Dr. King talks about justice delayed is justice denied. So the federal courts, they got involved, but it says this at the end, Brother T. The Methodist organization, however, did not win its legal victory until 1974. So this went on from 1969 to 1974. So it says 5 years after it first proposed the integrated project. By then, financing was no longer available. Interest rates had climbed, and the federal government had become less supportive of subsidizing integrated housing. It says the lawyers for the church group said that despite the court ruling, no developer in his or her right mind would proceed with the project in the face of such hostility. It was never built. Justice delayed is justice denied was the frequent experience of African Americans having to fight legal battles to obtain housing in white neighborhoods. So Dr. King was when I say that Dr. King is one of the I'm trying to gather the words that I want to say. I guess I would say the most underrated thinkers. Typically when we talk about our greats, people they don't go to Dr. King. When we talk about our intellectual giants, they don't people typically don't mention Dr. King, but if you read his work, and I'm talking about his articles that he published or that he wrote when he was at Morehouse, Brother T, all the way up until he was assassinated, he was ahead of his time. A lot of the things that he predicted in his work have come to pass and are coming to pass. He was ahead, Brother T, but a lot of people can't get past the nonviolent strategy that he used in order to precipitate the change that he wanted. So people get caught up on that, and they get caught up on seeing the pictures of the brothers and sisters in the civil rights movement, the civil rights marches with, getting beat up by police, and the sit-ins that occurred, the lunch counter sit-ins and things of that nature. So people get caught up with all of that imagery, and they get caught up with that nonviolent strategy. And some people disagree with it. You know, people like Kwame Ture, he was rolling with Dr. King in the strategy initially, and then he was like, "Look, Dr. King, look, this strategy only work with folks who have a conscience. The America doesn't have a conscience, so we can't keep using this." So there were people who disagreed with the strategy, but I think that we get lost in that and don't realize or recognize this man's intellect. And so anyway, Brother T, I'm going to go ahead and continue. At the bottom of page 126, it says, while many de jure segregation policies aim to keep African Americans far from white residential areas, public officials also shifted African American populations away from downtown business districts so that white commuters, shoppers, and business elites would not be exposed to Black people. So they called this slum clearance. So it says by the mid 20th century, slums and blight were widely understood euphemisms for African American neighborhoods. Now the code word is urban. We hear urban, that means Black. Back in the day, it was slums and blight. So people knew that, okay, we're dealing with an African American community. Now the code word is urban. So when we say urban, okay, that means Black. And so it was slum clearance. And so it says one slum clearance tool was the construction of the federal interstate highway system. It says in many cases, state and local governments with federal acquiescence design interstate highway routes to destroy urban African American communities. Highway planners did not hide their racial motivations. And so, Brother T, I want to show you a highway right in Baltimore that literally, they call it the highway to nowhere. My father talks about this often. It's a highway that goes nowhere. We literally jump on the highway after we go through Emerson Avenue, and Emerson Avenue turns into Mulberry. We get to a light and we can turn onto the highway. And Brother T, the highway goes through this underpath, right, that dumps us at Martin Luther King within like 2 to 3 minutes. So where did this highway go? Like literally, they built a highway through a Black community that doesn't go anywhere. And let me show the family this. So I bear witness to this. I'm sitting here, T, wondering why did they build this highway? Well, they built the highway with the intent to destroy the Black community. So let's look at this article. And family, I'll drop it in the chat. Shout out to my brothers and sisters from Baltimore who are in the building. Let me boom, boom, boom. Yep, segregation by design, family. So that's the link. That's the link to the article. It says Baltimore's highway to nowhere destroyed Black neighborhoods. The Inflation Reduction Act could help tear it down. So hold on. This is a 6-minute read. I'm not going to read all of it. But this is the highway, family, that I'm talking about, Brother T. You know what I'm talking about. It literally is a highway that dumps us out right here on Martin Luther King Boulevard.
You see where those gates at? You see where those gates under that bridge? This is where the homeless used to live. So they put those gates there so the homeless would not, congregate there.
Absolutely. Look at this. This is the highway, y'all. Look at it. It don't go anywhere. Look at the pictures, family. Oh, that was the only pictures. All right, I just want to show y'all. So this stuff that this book is talking about, Brother T, it really hits home for me because I see it. I see how our people live near the dumps, live near the power lines, live. You get what I'm saying, Brother T? Live near the industries. I see where we live. We live near the plants. We live by the railroad tracks. I see this. I see where they ran a highway through Baltimore. And it's not just Baltimore, Brother T. It's Baltimore, it's Detroit, it's St. Louis, it's Atlanta, it's where everywhere we are. You see the effects of these policies and plans and practices that happened prior to you and I even being born that shaped our communities. And so we see it, Brother T. But yeah, this is a highway right here in Baltimore. It goes absolutely nowhere. And so he goes on to say the highway system. I read that. It says the story of the highway planning began in 1938. It says when the federal government first considered aid for interstate highways, the Secretary of Agriculture and subsequently Vice President Henry Wallace proposed this to who, Brother T? Who was this?
Yeah, Roosevelt.
Roosevelt. Isn't that the black president? Black folks love them. That was, before Clinton. But yeah, right. Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt. That was the president that everybody loved. Black people adored Teddy Roosevelt or Franklin D. Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, right? And I told you my father was named after him. Some people say Delano, but we pronounce my father's name Delano. And so, yeah, we say Delano. Some people say Delano, but we say Delano. But my grandmother named my father after Franklin D. Roosevelt because he was a president that was loved by the black community. Yeah. Oh, if only my grandmother, peace be upon her soul, Murder Bailey, if only she were alive today, I'd have said, Grandma, this man created policies that hurt us. Yes. This isn't somebody that we should have held in high regard and love. This was somebody who actually created policies that destroyed our communities and destroyed our wealth. You get what I'm saying? And so anyway, it says that he proposed that the Secretary of Agriculture, Henry Wallace, proposed to President Roosevelt that highways routed through cities could also accomplish the elimination of unsightly and unsanitary districts. All right. So fast forward in 1943, it says the American Concrete Institution urged the construction of urban expressways for the elimination of slums and blighted areas. So for the elimination of African American communities. So it says in 1949, the American Railroad Builders Association wrote to President Truman that if interstates were properly routed through metropolitan areas, they could contribute to a substantial manner to the elimination of slum and deteriorated areas. It says an important influence on national legislation and administration of the highway system was the Urban Land Institute, whose 1957 newsletter recommended that city governments survey the extent to which blighted areas may provide suitable highway routes. By 1962, the Highway Research Board boasted that interstate highways were eating out slums and reclaiming blighted areas. Brother T, that you want to chime in?
Dr. Mott, thank you so much for that. The plan to displace African Americans by building a highway, 1938, as you mentioned. That's the plan. It goes on to show you how HUD was involved. I'm going to page 129. Proof that this was to blacks' detriment. This is what I titled this portion. 12 years later, a federal appeals court concluded that the HUD officials knew that the highway would disproportionately destroy African American homes and make no provision for assisting them in finding new lodging. The record supports a finding that HUD must have known that discriminatory practices which pervaded the private housing market in Hammermeck and indications that of the overt prejudice among some persons involved in carrying out the urban renewal projects in the city. Once again, the word urban, the urban renewal projects in the city. So it was a court-ordered remedy was construction of new housing in the city only for those families who had been displaced, who could still be found. Because it took so long because of the courts, and we mentioned this earlier in discussion, that by the time the court cases were over, they couldn't find all the people who were targeted, right? So, and who was, so it goes back to say, let me go back. So who could still be found, and who had indicated to the interviewers that they would be willing to return to Hamtramck. Because the litigation had dragged on, the number was small share of those who had suffered the harm, most of whom had no choice but to move to the Detroit ghetto, once again being displaced, not as a benefit to us, but at a detriment, right? So federal interstate highways buttressed segregation in cities across the country. In 1956, the Florida State Road Department routed I-95 to Miami. Unconstitutionally zoning ordinances had intended but failed to accomplish 2 decades earlier. So remember, the last strategy was zoning. The new strategy was public domain by putting, like Dr. Ma'at mentioned earlier, now putting the highway. So zoning couldn't get rid of all Negro towns across the world. Now building these highways could, as we got a highway that goes nowhere here in Baltimore, right? But matter of fact, it goes through the hood, but it leads to the main hospitals in downtown. Okay, I'm sidetracked, Dr. Mahad.
No, go ahead.
That's sidetracked in Baltimore. That's where those houses, University of Maryland, University of Maryland School, all the stuff downtown. Okay. So anyway, back in Florida, the alternative routes utilizing an abandoned railway right of way was rejected, although it would have been resulted in a little population removal. When the highway was eventually completed in the mid 1960s, it had reduced the community of 40,000 African Americans to 8,000. By the time it fended 40,000 people, it dwindled down to 8,000 people in that area. That's one way to get rid of blacks in any area by the end of this plan. I highlighted this part. In Camden, New Jersey, an interstate highway destroyed some 3,000 low-income housing units from 1963 to 1967. So in 4 years, 3,000 low-income housing. Now, remember how we got this housing, the low-income housing. Now they got a plan to remove us from those houses and displace us somewhere else. In less than 4 years, 3,000 people, 3,000 low-income units. A report by the New Jersey State Attorney General Office concluded, it is obvious from a glance at the transit plans that an attempt of being made to eliminate the Negro and Puerto Rican ghetto areas by building highways that benefit white suburbanites, facilitating their movement from suburbs to work and back. Once again, a benefit to get the whites to work in the city by building these highways so they can get to work. And this is when we come to that picture. So we're winding down, Dr. Ma'at.
Oh yeah.
So we're coming down to a couple things that I highlighted, but I'll let you go because you can summarize pretty good.
Oh no, I was thinking. So basically, like you said, these highways were ran through Hamtramck, Michigan, Camden, New Jersey. Look at this. It says Los Angeles. They had a freeway system that was built through there. Okay. And it talked about this law right here that was passed in 1956. Let me show the family this. I'll drop the link to this in the chat. It says the Federal Highway Administration. So there was a Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 that was passed. It says creating the interstate system. It says an average of 196,425 vehicles per day roll over this section of the Capital Beltway, shown in the mid 1960s. Says this statistical from the traffic. So you're looking at this up. So it's getting into, that's Eisenhower. Did I click the right one? I think that is it. Hold on, Brother T. Or did I click this one? I think it's this one right here. The National Institute Defense Highway Act. This one right here of 1956. Okay. So this act, is this act. It says it authorized the building of highways throughout the nation. So this is the one right here, family. And I will throw this link in the chat. So they ended up passing this in 1956. And so they were able to get funding, all right, to create highways that literally destroyed Black communities. And as I stated earlier, these highways were created all in Atlanta, Michigan, Detroit, Jersey, New Jersey. All right, they used this money to literally build highways that destroyed our community. So on page 131, it says after more African Americans brought houses in the area to LA. So that's still LA. So they talked about LA. I'm trying to summarize, Brother T, to keep it pushing because, like you said, we coming down to the wire. I mentioned the 1956 Interstate Highway Program. I dropped that link in the chat. So I'm on page 132 now, family. So right here, I highlighted the first paragraph, Brother T, at the top of page 131, where he says, in southern and border states and in some northern cities where explicit school segregation was practiced before the Supreme Court's 1954 Brown decision, authorities developed another tactic to impose racial segregation where it would not otherwise exist, placing the only schools that served African American children in designated African American neighborhoods and providing no transportation for Black students who lived elsewhere. African American families who wanted their children to be educated had no choice but to find new housing in the newly segregated areas. All right. So, literally, family, they would close the schools in these communities. So, let's suppose that they say, hey, this is an area we want to designate for whites only. And let's say that there were some Black people already living there. They come in, they close the schools, they build a high school, right? Or something like that, elementary, middle, high school. They build a school for white people. They say this is a white-only high school or a white-only school. The Black school then now is opened up on the west side. And I'm just giving just an example. They'll open up a Black school on the west side. So then Black people from that neighborhood would say, hey, well, I got to move from here because I got to go over here so that my children can attend school. So I got to move over here. So Black folks will leave the neighborhood. And before you know it, white folks come in. Now the neighborhood is lily white. Right. So they've done that to Black folks, or they even done that to white folks, Brother T. When they wanted to get white folks out of the area, they would build a school right there for Black children. And then white folks and they would build a brand new white school across town. And so they would force white families to leave their communities, to go to the schools across town. And then before you know it, their neighborhoods will become all Black. And so they ran this game with us by using schools. Literally by building schools and using schools. So again, this was another tactic, okay, to define, the racial demographics of a particular community. Go ahead, Brother T.
School building programs were the key to preserving school segregation long after Brown and versus the School Board Association, right? So once again, Dr. Mott, you mentioned perfectly all the strategies. Now we got the highways together. Now that everyone's settled in their homes, what can we do next? All right, let's build school regulations and zoning.
Come on, go to your zone school. Remember that, Brother T?
Yes.
You can only go to your zone school. You can't go to any school outside.
So then outside your zone, you go to jail.
Go ahead, Brother T.
You get it fined. Come, Dr. Mott. Do you see how intricate these plans are? See, when we can't plan past Saturday and Sunday, but they plan 10, 20 years down the line. Facts. And they realize once one plan meets restriction and these daggone laws and regulations, we got to find another way to be crafty, to get the end goal. This right here, page 137, last paragraph. White schools in the area designated to African Americans were closed or allowed to deteriorate. Each time the board made a decision about schools for African American pupils, the chief consideration was avoiding proximity to white districts. Professor Benjamin concludes that Houston's school building programs were the key to preserving school segregation long after the Brown decision declared unconstitutional. The end goal was to make sure whites kept resources the whites had control of their neighborhoods and anything that came along with it. You wanted to take us to court and change our plan, we'll make a better plan. End goal is always in mind. Self-preservation. Black
That's
first.
right. Black first, brother T. And I just want to add this stuff regarding school segregation and using school segregation as a tactic. It happened in Austin, Texas. The book talks about that. The book talks about it happening in Raleigh, North Carolina. It happened in Atlanta. It happened in Houston, Texas, and I'm sure all over the U.S. And so, Brother T, I'm glad that you closed us out with that note. Family, next week we will be back, all right, to discuss chapter 9. It says state sanctioned violence. Oh my gosh, Brother T. I know this chapter, chapter 9 next week is going to be heavy. State sanctioned violence against Black people is going to be the topic for next Sunday. So family, make sure that you tune in next Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Even if you don't have the book, haven't read the book, make sure that you tune in. Okay, because I'm pretty sure that as we discuss these chapters, even though you may not have the book, haven't read the chapter, that you walk away learning something. Brother T, do you have any closing words, brother?
Just study these plans. If you have this book, family, go back and just see how intricate these plans were. The end goal from all the things that happened in this chapter down to the schooling, which we ended off with in this part, was all the plan to the beginning. Segregation and keeping their communities going. So, Dr. Mott, it just, once it unravels, and after we finish the chapter, it makes me understand the plan in a deeper way. So it just hit me when I saw it. Like, dang, they got back to segregation. They found loopholes.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. To keep on doing, exercising their plans. You get what I'm saying? So as we fought to change laws, they started changing their strategies. And I'm just reading the chat, Brother T. And a lot of people are like, yeah, this happened in my city. Interstate, look at this. Ubuntu says Interstate 10 runs through New Orleans. There was another sister. She said right here, she said, it's funny how the expressway, Dan Ryan in Chicago, was built to separate races. And now it's supposedly named after a Black man named John Baptiste. Like, come on. Like, when you go through this chat, I'm reading, and family, when you type stuff in the chat, I read it. I saw the trolls in there too. I had to block a couple of trolls. Mad because I brought on Dr. Karinga. So now they think I'm a Fed. She working with the Fed. She brought on Dr. Karinga. Yes, and I'm gonna bring him back again. I'm gonna have him to do a couple of webinars with me. I absolutely am going to continue to work with Dr. Karinga. And all of you who are calling this man a Fed should be ashamed of yourself. You should go do your due diligence and read the work of Geronimo Pratt. He cleared that up. He cleared that accusation up in 1994, I believe, when he got released after doing 27 years. He cleared Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. He cleared Dr. Karanga's name, family. He cleared his name. Just read the work. The work is out there, man. You just got to pick up a book and read and stop this COINTELPRO behavior, because as Dr. Karanga broke down, Brother T, and I know this kind of going off on a tangent, but he talked about COINTELPRO behavior. One thing was disruption, right? Disruption of Black organizations, instigating arguments and beef, right? Dissension, instigating dissension between organizations, and character assassination. So when we participate in that type of stuff, right? Character assassination, and we instigate things like I'm not going to put the sister's name out there, but I got a phone call today that told me how you have brothers and sisters, watching a particular brother's platform, and they're screenshotting things that this brother is saying and then sending it to another brother. When you start doing stuff like that, that's COINTELPRO behavior. When you participate in character assassination, that's COINTELPRO behavior. When you join an organization with the purpose of disrupting that organization, that's all COINTELPRO information. COINTELPRO behavior, and we got to stop that stuff, family. We got to stop that stuff. So anyway, I was just looking at these comments, Brother T, while we were talking, and I couldn't help but to notice all of us living in different cities had the same experience. Oh, yeah. Highway such and such is running through that community. Oh, yeah. I remember this community is living over here by, a dump. This community is right there beside, some plants. And so all of us, even though we're in different parts of the hells of North America, the experience is the same for Black people in America. It's still the same. And so anyway, Brother T, thanks for those closing words, family. Join us back here next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to discuss Chapter 9 of The Color of Law by Ricard Rothstein. Again, this chapter is going to be talking about state-sanctioned violence against Black people. I will be live, family, this Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be speaking with Dr. William Sandy Darity, who is the author of, what's his book? From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century. So he called me up, Brother T, because he heard that I shouted out his book at the reparations rally. So he sent me a beautiful email, and I said, Doc, won't you come back on the platform and let's talk about reparations? That's kind of, instead of talk about reparations and what it is and why we're old, let's kind of shift the discussion to what do we need to do to achieve it? What needs to be done? Let's kind of shift it from what it is, why we're old, to what needs to be done. And so that's the conversation that I'm going to have with Dr. Darity on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then also, family, on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm going to go live to give my thoughts about the Wakanda Forever movie. If you didn't see it, family, don't watch the live, because I'm going to be talking about, the movie. Is a spoiler alert, and I'm going to put that in brackets. Spoiler alert, my review of Wakanda Forever. I'll be talking about that on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will be bringing on Dr. Boyce Watkins, a wife, Dr. Watkins. She'll be coming on to talk about trauma, how poverty is trauma. And I don't think, Brother T, we recognize that a lot of us are traumatized because we grew up in poverty. And so we're going to be, go ahead, Brother T.
Did you see the babies look at their homes be destroyed? The wrecking ball.
That's trauma.
That's trauma.
That's trauma. That's trauma, Brother T. And
then
so
the years of being displaced. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. No, go ahead. You
that's
said
trauma.
Years of being, yeah, that's right.
We just talk, we always go back to slavery and say, oh, it was way back then. But did you see the pictures of the baby's face, watch their homes be destroyed? And then the plan was to not have anything for them, no resources set out for them. And when we did, it was placed in the places of destitute. That's trauma.
That is trauma. And so we're going to be talking about that, the effects of trauma. I mean, the effects of poverty, how poverty traumatizes us. Can you imagine coming home? You don't have any gas and electric. You don't have food. That's traumatizing. Yes. You don't have any gas and electric. You don't have any food. You get kicked out of your place. You're moving from place to place. And we don't realize that is traumatizing. And so she is literally, she's a doctor. Her name is, I'm saying she's Dr. Boyce Watkins' wife, but she's a doctor in her own right. And so she has her PhD in psychology, and she is a licensed therapist. And so she's going to come on and talk about, poverty, not having access to finances, how that is traumatizing. Yeah. And so we're going to unpack that at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday. So family, I'll be live Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you don't catch me on those days, catch me back here on Sunday at 7 p.m. to discuss Chapter 9 next Sunday, as Brother T and I discuss Chapter 9 of The Color of Law. And if we don't see you, have a black-tastic week. Peace.